Hey folks, this is Fabrice. I'm joined today by Syphro and by Positive4ce. How are you guys doing?
Sorry if I just hit
Doing
my water bottle and it went dung. Doing good, you know.
doing all right. Just got my tea here.
Oh dude, you got your tea? You're all set? So today
Yep.
we want to talk a little bit about chapter balance. We've been doing a series. You can check out the other videos on Ace and Syphro's channels. Today though, we want to talk a little bit about chapter 3 balance, how it flows, some of the things that we would highlight, some of the things we like, some of the things that we are tested in our souls by. And I think that kind of to set this up, I want to talk about how different chapter 3 is from chapter 1 and chapter 2. Because chapter 1 and chapter 2, they're more spread out designs. There's more of a flow, kind of a natural feel, I would say, to the way that things connect and the way that you progress through the map. Whereas chapter 3, because you're set in a castle and you have corridors, it's far more predictable. Of all the chapters, the chapter 3 design is the simplest, I would say, in a way. It's definitely the most structured, and you're not going to spend nearly as much time pathing in general because you can predict where you're going to be and your approaches to POIs. An interesting thing about that is it means that your chances of full clearing chapter 3 are quite a bit higher, I think, than chapter 1 and chapter 2. And that's partially because of the pathing. That's partially because you're going to be scaled significantly starting out chapter 3. So if you get to chapter 3, chances are good that your build is already in a healthy place, or else you would have washed out in chapter 1 or 2. But that's some of the things I think that are interesting to note about how distinct chapter 3 is from chapter 1.
One of the things that I found interesting recently about it is how vision towers pretty much, in terms of their effect of revealing points of interest on the map, they matter far less compared to chapters 1 and 2, especially compared to chapter 2. I think that's the most important one, because as we said, it is the most spread out, or like it has the most land mass. And chapter 3, basically, it's just a zigzag motion. You're just going up and down throughout the different sections of it, so it's pretty easy to just, go through and you do what you need to do. The only time where you have to really deviate for that is the side quest, potentially, if you don't plan ahead for that one, or if you have to find the key for the mini boss. Really just like streamlined and easy to parse, which I've had thoughts about that as well, how it basically just like gets a little boiled down at the end, which maybe some people might argue, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, that the simplest map should be first and the most complex one should be last because you're like building into it. I personally would disagree with that. I think the way chapter 3 functions in this game, maybe the epilogue is more apt, but it functions a little bit like if you guys play Risk of Rain 2, how that, I guess, Area 5 and then the moon as well function, where it's kind of just like a culmination. I guess that's how I'd say, like level 5 and then level 6 are like the chapter 3 and epilogue of this game. So it's kind of just like a you get to this point, there's a bunch of harder enemies, sure, but you're approaching a wind down until you get to the final boss.
Yeah, when they were designing Avalon and they put out their video on it, I remember them saying they were fine with the boss being in the same location every time. They wanted it to feel kind of like the end of the game. You're climbing this castle, you're going up the staircases, you get the mood set on each level, like it becomes a little more red and like gloomy, especially on the top level. And so I'm pretty fine with them saying this chapter is going to be more straightforward with how you run it. Go left and right, then go up, left and right, and go up, because it does have, like, again, you end up running this chapter pretty much the same way every single time, and I guess that can take away from it. But they are building to this like final boss feeling. And when the claws were the final boss, I remember the first time playing it, I was really stoked going through chapter 3 the first couple times playing it. And again, I think with repetition it becomes less interesting because there's less thought process behind what you're actually doing. And the order, for me, the order mainly just comes down to, do I do my grimoire right now or do I wait on that? But I really don't mind the layout of this map. And then one of the big things this map has is the corridors,
Yep.
which is different. And sometimes there's enemies in there. Like sometimes it kind of functions like a camp, sometimes it doesn't. I do like that not all of them, but it is kind of a place where you can target dream shards as well. Like you can farm there and have pretty good odds at just going in these if you need a couple more dream shards for something.
For sure, and I think maybe a little bit of a speculative add-on here is that something that I would maybe like to see in this chapter concerning the corridors and the map design and the pathing in general is maybe more stuff in the walls like the corridors. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full-on objective, but like maybe, I don't know, an armory. You go in, there's a couple enemies, and then you get a chest. quest, right? Something like along those lines, where it's just like another optional mini objective, you know, something easy and quick, similar to how the corridors work with the money. But I think that could add a little bit of diversity to the pathing of it and what you prioritize. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the design of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a hard chapter in general to, because I think that because your character is going to be scaled so much by the time you get to chapter 3, it's going to skew your perspective on how it feels. If we were to encounter it earlier, I think that if we were in chapter 3 and chapter 3 pathing a little bit earlier in our runs, we would probably notice different things about it. But because we were always playing it at a point where we're already really scaled, I think that colors our perspective on it. But going along those lines, I don't know if either of you have ever done the challenge modifier where that you start a random chapter and you started in chapter 3 and you just tried to play it through. Because chapter 3 is very, very hard if you don't if you aren't scaled. That's mostly because of the enemy design, their move sets. So I think that that's a conversation we could unpack a little bit.
I mean, if you're wanting to go in this right now, in our Google Doc, I wrote the point that I think chapter 3 has the least engaging enemies, and it's almost directly what it means is I think a lot of these enemies kind of force you to disengage. There's the wolves, there's the ones that bite you and hold you in place. If you're a melee character, you need to wait for an ability that either has an iframe or something a lot of times to get this damage in. Like sitting there as Scarlet Wolf form and committing to an attack, the wolf's bite kind of comes up pretty quickly. It's hard to judge when it's going to happen, and getting bit and locked in place can very easily end a run. And I think why it feels so bad compared to the other things like tree roots and spider webs is because those are a lot more telegraphed. You know, for the most part, you can see roots are coming at you. For the most part, you can see a spider lining up the web. The wolf bite, it's just a thing of, is it going to happen or is it not? And getting bit by that kind of sucks. Then there's the laser witches as well, which just have this like never-ending column of laser that goes further out and out. And when you have multiple of them set up in an area, it kind of just becomes a game of run away, wait for these lasers to end, and then go in and attack. Where I feel like some of the other chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2, have a lot more enemies balanced around one specific instance of damage that you can iframe, and then they might repeat it and you can get on the other side of them or something. I feel like a lot of enemies in this chapter just encourage you to wait for them to be done attacking and go in.
That general design of an enemy, basically like a laser shooting out from in front of them, they have one in Windblown, and I think the witches and the one in Windblown, in both cases, they are not hard enemies at all, but they are some of the most annoying enemies in my experience, just having to either like run around them or wait for their attack to be done. It's just like, it feels like an unnecessary time sink. And I don't know how much you guys played Hades. They also have those crystal enemies in the first, I don't remember if they're in the second game or not. I don't think they are, but at least not until later. But they have those crystal enemies that do a similar thing, but in Hades, I don't feel like there is much of an issue, and I don't know if that's because of how the game is designed with like its movement and all that, which I think Windblown is actually a little more similar to Hades in that aspect. It could also be like the turn radius on the ones in Windblown are a lot faster, I think, but in Hades it's just like, oh yeah, I'll just dash to the side and then I gotcha, you're done. So it's not always like the worst thing, but that's type of archetype usually bothers me, where they just have like a laser or a beam coming out in front of them and you either wait or you gotta dodge around it, like get to their backside quickly.
Yeah, I know the ones you're talking about in chapter 1. They're crystals and it follows you, but they have kind of a little bit of an activation delay, and they're also not as long ranged as your abilities in Hades. I think that's why we don't have as much of an issue with them. Do you think that because of how much your character is scaled by the time you get to chapter 3, that if enemies were more balanced around AoEs and windows of vulnerability, they're easier to take advantage of, like the enemies are in chapter 2 and 1? Do you think that because characters and the players have scaled so much by the time they get to chapter 3, that would just remove too much of a barrier? Like players would just be able to play into chapter 3 too easily and roll the map, and that's why the enemies have to have big AoEs? Or do you think the AoEs do you think that it's excessive and it could be brought to a halfway point which allows more player agency and proactivity?
I think chapter 3 is balanced a little bit in the way, where they have that understanding of, for the most part, you're going to be pretty powerful going into chapter 3. Like, I really like fighting knights. I think knights are pretty fair and balanced. I think knights are a pretty easy enemy in a one-on-one. I think they get tough when there's a lot of them because they have, there's the sword ones with big AoE slams, and then there's the twin sword ones with the big AoEs and stuff. Those are fun to fight because you can see their animations very clearly and you can iframe through them. Even the broomstick witches I think are fair, but I think there's a little bit of gimmick that they know they're adding into chapter 3 to try to trick you in a way to get you killed. Those broomstick witches can activate from so far away and come off screen and snipe you that like chapter 3 is kind of balanced in a way of like, you're so strong, we need to kind of break some of the rules that we've had from our enemies in chapter 1 and 2, which feel very fair, very like, look at our animations, iframe through them. We're going to add in chapter 3 witches with a laser that you can iframe, but you're going to get hit after. Or the apple throwers aren't a huge problem really, but it's like we're going to throw AoE explosions all over the map.
Yeah.
So like you can't really get in here and actually get attacks off. You have to go explode all these apples, like run in, explode all the apples, then like dodge away from all the laser beams, then come back in. So I think, yeah, there is a little bit of a balance to it of they're going to be really strong. Let's kind of like our fodder enemies, you know, or like lower health ones kind of need to be a little gimmicky to actually get some kills.
It's interesting because you look through some of these enemies. So broom witches have an interesting thing that can happen. So if you're up against a wall and a broom witch runs over you, they can sometimes reset the damage. Like as they touch the wall, they can get 2 ticks off in the space of a breath and just delete you. The alpha wolves, similar to trees, it doesn't reset on hit, or is it just I think it's that they reset. Like wolf attacks will reset, so they'll spam out if they hit you with 1, and you'll end up with they'll combo you down. So it feels like there's a lot of things like that where a small mistake can quickly spiral into a bigger mistake. One of the things that was interesting is that after chapter 3 came out, they actually went back and they made some of these enemies harder, and blood gargoyles are a great example. So blood gargoyles are the really big ones, and now when their fury mode, their enraged mode is activated, they have that super long attack animation where they're spinning with their wings. That is like the most anti-melee thing ever, right? There's just no way to approach that animation as a main character.
Similar to Phoenix's in chapter 2, that's one that I feel like I've maybe learned the most in terms of like, well, this has bit me in the ass so many times. I gotta just like lock in and see how to really like tackle this in any given situation. And I feel like that is one where I've just like, I struggled with it a lot at first, and then it became kind of fine afterwards. Just kind of spacing for the most part, which is harder on the melee characters for sure. But like basically, if I'm playing Scarlet, for example, hitting the guy until he does his like big scream and then he starts spinning like a ballerina. At that point, when he starts spinning, you just power through him. You're on the other side of him, and then it's like, all right, see you later. He's just like off in the other direction, spinning away. So there are, I feel there are ways to handle it. In melee characters, it's a little more tedious for sure, but I think that's kind of with bigger enemies, it tends to be the case almost regardless. The tedium, like for example, the big trees in chapter 1, when they do there's AoE slam, that's way more annoying for melee characters because they have to fully back up and then they have to fully get back in, whereas ranged characters just have to like sidestep a little bit if they're properly spacing, and then maybe step back in a little bit, or maybe they can already reach the tree from outside of his slam range. So a little bit of give and take on both of those things. Like melee characters are a bit better at something, I assume.
I think overall Ravenswatch does a pretty decent job with melee. You get in, there's all kinds of iframes and stuff, and so I think that if you look across roguelikes as a genre, compare how difficult a melee character is in Risk of Rain 2, I guess. I know that Ace hasn't played it as much, but compare how much more difficult melee is in Risk of Rain 2 as opposed to melee versus Rain. I think they do a pretty good job. Chapter 3 is a little bit of an outlier there. I think that, to your point, right, there's definitely things that adjustments that you can make, but I think that one point that Ace has made and that we can come back to is that the adjustment is basically you take a break, right? You go in, you engage, and then you're like, okay, we're gonna just chill for 3 to 5 seconds, and then I'm gonna start doing damage again. And it's maybe a necessary evil because of how heavily player characters have scaled at this point in the game.
Yeah.
It is still kind of not like the most fun thing in the world.
I think one area is, if you look at other enemies in the game, no enemy is really meant to 1v1 you and kill you. Like take big trees, they have a telegraphed roots and they have a telegraphed swipe. If you're a melee character, you can play against this really easy by standing right next to them, and then they have their big slam you have to avoid. Take like the big crabs, they have their double swipe and dash. You can easily dash through them, and then they have their like, they shoot whatever plus out of their back or whatever. Blood Gargoyles, I almost feel like they need another moveset, like another move in their moveset, because they're like one of the only enemies where it's a 5-hit combo. You can't iframe through this. Yeah, you can dash to the back side of them and to hopefully avoid it. They do pivot pretty hard, but they're like one of the only enemies in the game that can easily 1v1 a melee character and actually kill you because of it. Like even knights, I don't think knights, if you're 1v1 with a knight, you shouldn't die in like almost every scenario, but
yeah,
I think the solution might be they're one of the few elite enemies that only has one move as well. So I mean they have one move and then they level up and they get an extension to their move, but I feel like they should have something else in their kit that maybe detracts from this 5-hit combo that opens them up more to like melee attacks.
I think similarly, they are one of the few elite enemies, if not the only elite enemy where, I guess the witches are this way, but the basic version and the elite version don't have any overlap in their movesets. Like he does his big swing, and the other small gargoyles, essentially, some of them do swing a little bit, but the other ones, they like do that rock throw, and the other ones play down pools of lava. I feel like you could maybe lend one of those abilities to him and have that be his other move. Because like, for example, the Mother Ghoul, she will throw rocks, she'll puke, and she'll bite, just like all the other small enemies in that like archetype. So I guess there are, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit, there are some elite enemies that don't exactly have the same moveset, but they'll at least have 2 moves that lets you do different things depending on what they are choosing to do.
Kind of wonder if it's going to turn into an A-boss. So if they're going to drop an A-boss, it has no sense.
True, yeah, like it does the big swing and it also lays lava and throws rocks and all that. Maybe something else as well.
Well, we are getting the wolf though, right? We're getting the wolf as the other key mini boss that looks like an actual dungeon that you go into that probably has some barriers, so that's going to be awesome. But I'm guessing that wolf will have some of their own unique moves, but I would not be surprised if we saw a like dash swipe attack that continues if the wolf hits you. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a jumping attack from those wolves and a howl as well. I would imagine 2 out of those 3 are probably reused in that boss fight, but I'd hope that boss fight has some unique things to it, especially to deal with, similar to the Cyclops, has something that really deals with multiple enemies at once. Like if you're playing co-op, I would want to see something like that.
If it's like in a little dungeon or a cave, they could have the howl like knock stalactites off the ceiling, and you have to dodge not only the big AoE howl, but also a bunch of little circles coming down.
Oh yeah, environment fights would be really, really nice.
Yep.
Something I wanted to mention, we talked about this in chapter 2, but there are 3 different types of wolf. It's weird, and I pulled up the wiki to make sure that I'm getting this right. So there's the alpha wolves, which are the big ones, and then there are timber wolves and dire wolves. Timber wolves are the smallest ones, and like timber wolves and dire wolves are very similar size, but the timber wolf is a little bit darker. The dire wolf has a little bit of a frosted look to it, and so the timber wolves are the ones that have the bite with the trap on it, and the dire wolves have a lacerate ability, which is that melee swipe cat-like paw thing. So
yeah,
it's interesting because I would not have known that if I hadn't checked the wiki, and it sounds like neither of you had noticed that there are 3 types of wolves either. So I think that might be a little bit of an unclear design distinction.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think sometimes color designs and all that in general, but I think maybe sometimes I assume that the darker ones might be like corrupted or something like that, so I haven't necessarily, like if I notice the difference at all, then it's like, oh, that's just a corrupted guy. I'm pulling it up just to make sure here. Timberwolf, direwolf, alpha wolf. I mean, yeah, I have definitely noticed that distinction, but I guess maybe I didn't either realize it was specifically like a different version, or I just didn't realize that they do different moves according to their color. So
I think
yeah.
with that information, I don't think it's going to change how I play it. I don't think I'm going to look at it
Yeah.
and be like, this has this attack and this has this attack, which would be helpful. I think my brain is just going to be like, wolf is going to bite me and keep me in place no matter what.
Well, they always stack, right? So whenever you fight a group of wolves, like 3 or 4 of these guys will all just stack up into one square. There's gonna be one biting, there's gonna be one swiping, pretty much every time.
I think, yeah, I mean, to be honest, if you play to avoid the bite regardless, you're fine, you know? It's just that when that bite does hit you, you're kind of screwed. especially if you got a corrupted alpha wolf jumping on your head right afterwards. Then it's like, oh, 200 damage right there, yay!
Yeah, they just delete you. Or like when you get trapped and there's the owl coming off, you can't escape. Unless, what's funny is Sea Dance, speaking of abilities that are just ridiculously strong, Sea Dance can get you out of trap. So
Yep.
I don't know. It's one of those other, like, Melusine is the undisputed queen of ravenswatch. So
It also gets you out of the spider route, which is pretty useful. That's one of my favorite parts about it. Is like, oh yeah, I can just like sit here in my attack stance and get hit by a CC ability, especially one that does no damage like the spider route, and then just teleport away. No biggie. We did touch on sword knights and spear knights, but did we also want to talk about mage knights on top of that, like the ones that shoot out the beam from their chest?
yeah, definitely. That's actually a really interesting one because they've become better. Because when they were first dropped, the beam life steal, like life drain thing that they did, just never hit. And now that it's kind of a dangerous ability again. Like it was always dangerous in terms of the damage, but now it's actually like, oh, I have to think about this and I have to avoid it.
Yeah, they track you pretty tough. That's another enemy though that I kind of wish had another move to add to that, because they will summon the skeletons, but those guys stand around doing nothing quite a bit.
Skeletons are such a non-issue. Yeah, every time you see them, it's just like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, you don't really need to pay attention to them. I think them having like even just a close range chest blast or something, you know, that just shot in like a maybe 135 degree arc in front of them or something would be nice. Just something else, because yeah, fighting those guys 1v1 is like it's nothing. You just miss their beam and you don't feel like you're ever in danger.
Yeah,
but
so
they are kind of meant to make other fights harder. They're meant to stand back and be something that detracts from melee characters.
Something I just thought of. Are undead swordsmen the least threatening enemy spawn in the game?
In the entire game, yes.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's gotta be. I don't know if, I know they have a sword attack. I don't know if they have anything else.
They're so slow. Yeah, it's funny because spawners are usually, you look at rocks and you look at ghouls and you almost always, or spiders, you almost always focus the spawners first in most threatening thing. And it's completely turned on its head. Like mage knights, you're like, oh dude, this guy, he can just chill out.
Yeah, no, that is actually really weird. Like, maybe they should add something, and this is probably a thing that would make me hate them even more. Or, I mean, I don't hate them a whole lot. It's mainly, I just go focus them so I don't get beamed while I'm fighting a bunch of knights. But if they added, like, skeleton archers or something as well, where there was a little bit more annoyance on, like, this guy really shooting me with an arrow from, like, 10 feet away? What's going on? I don't know. That would make skeletons at least feel like there's some threat level attached to them.
Now, I was looking at it to see which of these guys did it, but how do you feel about the healing prayer that the sword knight does?
Oh.
Is it just the sword knight?
I believe so. There's no wiki page on the spear knight, so it's not on the mage knight though.
I like that they have that added to the game, because its benefit is when you have a night camp of like 4 or 5 knights and you get them all down to 50%, but you have to disengage so much because of their AoEs or whatever, and then 2 of them start doing that. You're like, cool, now I can actually go kill the other 2 while these 2 do that. It is unfortunate that they're going to be back to full health, but I like that it can set the pace of a fight and give you the advantage on some of the other knights or like enemies around them.
Yeah. I'll say sometimes it annoys me, like if I have been doing some good AoE on a bunch of them, and then the last one happens to be a sword knight, and all of a sudden he's like, haha, fuck you, I heal. And it says here that technically you can interrupt it by dealing damage, but I don't think I really experienced that unless it's like a delayed interruption. Like you
Maybe a stagger, but yeah, I don't know if I've ever interrupted it just with damage.
I've definitely
it seems like
hit
he's
him.
just healing through it.
I've definitely hit him while he's in that animation, and he just continues to do it. So I think that's probably referring to stagger.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that can be annoying where he's just like out healing all of your damage, and it's like, well, I guess I gotta go through your entire health bar again, because if you're not super strong, they can be quite tanky with their armor and their overall HP. Overall, I mean, I'm glad that they have like a unique attack there, and sometimes it doesn't matter, but when I'm weak in a run, it definitely is impactful when they start healing.
Yeah, I like a camp. Like you say, take a gargoyle camp that has a bunch of gargoyles and 2 blood gargoyles. That's like, okay, let me just slowly end up clearing the fodder and then fight 2 blood gargoyles. I like that the night camps, it's just like 4 or 5 nights. And you're like,
Yeah.
this is going to be a threatening camp. I love having that sense of threat in ravenswatch where you're like, okay, let me dial in and pay attention a bit more because I really need to focus on these animations. Which again, I think chapter 3 kind of lacks. And again, part of it is because of the scaling that we have to that point. You know, you might just have like Snow Queen power build and you just spam that over and over and you don't have to worry about anything. But I like that those camps, nights specifically, it's a camp in chapter 3 where I feel like I play it like I play the camps in chapter 1 and 2, where you're a lot more focused on your iframes. And I think that's honestly where ravenswatch combat is the best, is that like trade and balance off of being right next to an enemy and using your abilities really intentionally.
Yeah, no, I really agree with that point. I will say the one time that feels a little not the case for me is when there are multiple spear guys and they're doing their like 1-2 and then the spin attack, and you
Oh,
gotta wait
yeah.
for that to go through. But it's really short. It's not nothing like the gargoyle who's going crazy over there in the corner, just like spinning to his heart's content.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of a big group of enemies problem, right? Like some
True.
enemies are fine in fewer numbers, and then they hit a critical mass, and there's no way to approach anymore. I think that trees actually will have this sometimes, particularly in four-player runs when you get to a big tree camp and there's just a wall of forest, just gigantic attacks overlapping. So I think that the Sword Knight design, or the not the Sword Knight, but the Spear Knight design, isn't really the problem so much as just when there tends to be a larger group. You guys had that experience when you go into a camp and you aggroed a Sword Knight that ended up following you, but you don't see him because he's so far away, and all of a sudden you have the AoE on you and he jumps across the map and just smacks you.
Dunk, yeah.
Yes.
It's so
Space
funny.
Jam.
It's like
yeah.
I definitely have been punished by that, and it didn't feel very good at the time. But it's also just so funny. You need some threat in the game. That's an interesting little detail in chapter 3.
I was gonna say, can you guys imagine, by the way, if there was a camp of 5 blood gargoyles, like there are like camps of 5 knights or more? I feel like that would be, just hypothetically speaking, just the worst thing that could possibly happen in a ravenswatch game.
Yeah, because they would all attack at different times and they'd cover each other's backs so well.
Yep.
You'd be like, I can't
Yep.
do anything. But I do think the knights, the sword knights, that third hit that they have where it slams the ground and like sends out, like it's a little bit more of an AoE than the first 2 hits. That is a little bit deceptively long as well. There's been times where I feel like I'm on the very, and that one hits real hard.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like I'm on the very end of that, or I'm like just outside range. And I don't know. Sometimes, again, we all probably have a little bit different experiences because we record our videos and you go back and edit and you see when you get hit by something. And sometimes you're looking at it again like, really? Yeah, so those guys, their range is deceptive where you're hit by something that you're definitely standing right outside of. But I don't know, maybe like a pebble flew up and hit you in like the noggin.
And by and large, I think that I like the design of the knight enemies. I think that AoEs are an interesting conversation too. I've noticed some inconsistencies with Scarlet's bomb. Sometimes the AoE is a little bit larger than the animation on the ground, particularly when you have pulverize. I think that sometimes the UI doesn't update to show the increased size. So it's not something that I've screenshotted and sent to the devs. So maybe that's a little bit on me. Maybe that's something that could be documented better.
You want to talk about
Mini bosses?
probably one of the most least engaging mini bosses. Not least engaging. It's very engaging. You need to be focused, but
Yes.
least, I guess, inspired.
Yeah.
Fun mini boss.
Yeah, the witches, it's, what I think, honestly, I think that there probably was content for Avalon that got cut. I imagine there's probably an iteration of this game if they were on a different schedule, where that we get a witch mini boss more like the White Lady in chapter 1. But as it is, we get 3 regular witch enemies that all have boss armor. Not quite as cool.
Yeah, I will say with because I think they have extra health as well.
Oh yeah, they have a lot. Their health is pushed pretty high. I think it's overtuned a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I like the timer on that. There are times where even in runs where I feel like I'm strong and I'm killing the rest of the map fairly easily, I go into that and I'm like, am I really ready to do this? I'm level 10. Maybe I could go back to the shop and spend some money, but overall, I'm like, I feel like I'm pretty strong here. And then nope, they're so tanky and so slippery with their teleport that I just sometimes don't have enough time to complete it with how tanky they are.
I think if they went with that idea of like these are the boss witches of all the witch archetypes, I know that the laser witch sends out like the triangle, like the 3-prong laser, and the apple thrower just has bigger apple explosions. I wish there was a little bit more identity. Like I would have been fine if it was just 3 witches. I don't even think the broomstick witch has a unique thing about her moveset, but if there was just a little bit more identity to each of these witches, that like I think the lightning one probably has the most, like adding the 3-prong lightning. But I wish they just took the concept of what each witch does and built on it in a way where they were their own unique thing, but you still understood that this is the head witch of that archetype.
Yeah, I think something like that would have been cool. But it's it's done now. It's in the game. It's a little bit rough, I'd say, as opposed to a lot of the rest of Chapter 3. Hopefully, you know, when they introduce the new boss fight with the wolf in a cave, you know, or some kind of a dungeon area, that'll be pretty sweet. I think that'll be a really fun direction for the game to go. So look forward to that. But I think that right now that mini boss isn't as good as of a place. But I think that maybe, you know, speaking of like developer time and trying to make space for things, maybe a lot of that effort and time that could have gone into the witches went into Arthur, because Arthur is another one of those really ambitious high lift, like high energy lift kind of designs. And by and large, I think Arthur is solid. I wouldn't say that I enjoy the experience of Arthur as much as I enjoy or appreciate the Cyclops, but it is more unique than the Three Little Pigs, although the Three Little Pigs are cool because there's variation. I think the gameplay of Three Little Pigs is honestly probably more interesting to me than King Arthur, but the storytelling of King Arthur is better.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when you press tab and wait for the dialogue to be done.
That's another thing, yeah. Okay, so maybe it's a little bit the way that we play the game, but the Arthur delays, like for the dialogue, like, you know, you trigger the teleport and then she goes to Kranon Ur and you trigger another dialogue, and that's so annoying from I just want to clear the map. It would be nice if there's a way to accelerate that a little bit. Because it's interesting, because there's dialogue with the Three Little Pigs, but that doesn't actually stop the gameplay.
She should just open it the second you finish the like night cave thing. It should just be open after that. Arthur is a fight that I want to like more. I feel like the Cyclops, no matter what, even if it gets bursted down, I have to fight the Cyclops quite a bit to get to the stagger before I burst the Cyclops down. Arthur, I feel like sometimes it is just instantly obliterated. I remember having a stream for Breeze that you were in, and I, for the first time, or no, I mentioned like seeing the laser for the first time.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
lasers the tree. I'm like, and like, I don't know, I didn't even realize that defending the tree was part of the fight until the tree got lasered. I was like, wait, what? I could fail this? Some of the moves, I wish there was a little bit more engaging moves. Like he runs around and sets the fire behind him, and then he slams on either side of him. The Cyclops has maybe the most amount of moves of any enemy in the game. And I would have loved, I agree with what you're saying of Arthur. There's like this spectacle to it, and there's a lot of attention in that fight to like the design of the character and what's going on. I wish there was potentially a few more moves that kept you a bit more engaged in that fight.
See, when I did a video a while back before Chapter 3 was released at all, of things that I wanted to see in Ravenswatch, one of my requests in that video was to have Arthur, who was teased, be a roaming boss, and he would just like come through and like bother you every once in a while. You had to like do a certain amount of damage to him to get him to go away. Or I guess it wasn't necessarily revealed that it was Arthur before, it was just kind of like a Headless Horseman character, but that was essentially what I was hoping for. And I think, like, for me personally, I like the way Chapter 3 is now, and I like the way Arthur is now. But I think that would kind of, with some other changes, be a little bit of the best of both worlds with how, like, we were talking about, like, oh, Chapter 3 kind of gets a little, not stale, but repetitive and, like, samey in the way that you approach it. And then also in the way that, like, Arthur might not have the most diverse like he has pretty unique attacks, but there's what, 3 of them that he does: the slam, the fire trail, and the 2 half circle AoEs. That was just kind of like a hypothetical that I threw out there, and it was, to be fair, probably way after they developed the character in the boss fight in the first place, so it was kind of like an empty wish. Like, I wasn't asking them to do it. It was more like, I hope this is what they did. But in the end, we still got a fun boss fight. I will say, like, compared to the Cyclops, yes, he does not really hold a candle, but compared to the witches, I would much rather fight him any day of the week.
Credit where credit is due. Like, they definitely thought a lot and worked really hard on the art assets and all the things around Arthur. I'd love to have roaming boss. I think that'd be a fun thing. Like, if we started looking into alternative chapters, sometimes you get Avalon and sometimes you get something else. It'd be fun to have some of these other mechanics we're talking about in those instead. Although chapters take a long time to come out, and I think that the degree of stress that we feel when we see a straw quest, I can only imagine if there's like a preferred and a less preferred chapter, the kind of negative endorphins that you're going to have in your brain the moment you spawn in. So there's definitely going to, if we do go that direction, it's going to be really hard to add content to the game without biasing players towards just one particular outcome, and if they don't get it, then they're just angry because they didn't get the RNG they wanted.
Right, and like we've referenced the game a few times already, but Risk of Rain 2 has those alternate areas that you can go to, and I think there's a small preference in some of those, especially in the 4th area, where it's either the Abyssal Depths, the Siren's Call, or I can do this. Hold on. No, I don't remember the mushroom one. Sorry.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah. The verticality in that last one is really tough.
People, that's actually exactly what we're talking about, though. The mushroom one, people tend to dislike that one the most, and so they'll prefer Abyssal Depths, or ironically, they're the ones that I remember the name for, but Siren's Call as well. For Siren's Call also has that unique boss fight that you can come through with.
Right.
But it just goes to show that you can definitely have a diverse area, and it's not always necessarily a good thing. Like in terms of having an alternate path, which I think Risk of Rain 2 is a very muted example of that. It's not like a huge thing where someone is like, oh, this part is ruined because I went to the mushroom place. It's just like, oh, well, darn it, at least in my experience.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that's really different between a Risk of Rain and a Ravenswatch is that looping, right? Looping's a big part of that game. And Risk of Rain 2 gets away with some derpiness because of the way that items stack, that it's intentional, right? It's not like a bad thing, it's a feature, not a bug. Ravenswatch is a very tailored, anticipatory game where that you're really looking at key points and inflections, and you need things to happen on a certain schedule, or else the run is off its kilter. So it's going to be interesting to see how we add diversity to the gameplay of Ravenswatch, or how the devs do that without it also having negative spiraling effects. But you guys want to talk about the chapter 3 boss fight?
Yeah, I can start out by saying that, unfortunately, I think between all 3 of them, it is my least favorite, but not necessarily because it's bad or anything like that. I do like the fight, but and especially as it was especially true at the very beginning, probably because of the lack of experience with it compared to the other 2 boss fights, but it's gotten better over the course of my playtime with these bosses. But yeah, they're just unfortunately my least favorite amongst the 3, not by a lot, but significant enough to make the distinction.
I think when Avalon first came out, a lot of characters, like if I were to tier list characters, that was drastically different the second chapter 3 came out, specifically because of these bosses and your ability to stagger some bosses. I remember struggling with getting my first win on Melusine, surprisingly enough, her being one of the best characters, because I felt like I never had a build that was good enough to stagger these bosses quick enough, and I felt like I was in the 7 to 8 damage cycle range for killing these bosses. I think it's a lot less of an issue now. I really haven't noticed it as much, except for doing challenge runs where I know I'm under level. But I really like these bosses in the sense of they seem the hardest to me, and a clutch tight run against these bosses feels like the most rewarding run in my mind. These are the most rewarding bosses to beat, especially with how their damage phase works. If you can say you have them both around like half health and you have pretty poor damage and you manage to kill one, and just as they're standing up and you get the bonus time to go over to the other one and do damage and potentially kill that one, I feel like the damage cycles of these bosses are really, really hype, because missing the damage cycle, it's like, oh no, this one's going to have health again, we're going to go through this again. So I feel like that it's pretty engaging there in that aspect of it.
I also feel like it's changed as I've gotten more knowledgeable about that fight, because sometimes if you're struggling with damage, you know, you think, oh, I'm going to focus down a boss, but then the boss revives and it gets a bunch of health back. And so if you have a low damage build, one of the adjustments that you make is you don't try to finish a boss until you have them both low. And so maybe it takes 3 or 4 damage cycles, but at the end of that, you know, at the end of that, once you've worked them down, you are able to get both of them, to take both of them out in short order. So there's definitely been an adjustment in my play as I've gotten more proficient, but I also think that there's an adjustment too as we've learned to play with some characters a little bit better, because I definitely have had that experience with Ice King when I've been having a pretty decent run and I get to chapter 3 and my build, there was just no way with the Ice King build that I had that I could ever beat that chapter 3 boss. And I think that in general, ravenswatch, one of the strongest aspects of it is the character design. Some characters you will think are terrible, and then you'll have 50 games on them, and all of a sudden something will click and you'll realize what a strong aspect of that character you missed on your first pass.
Yeah. I will say a complaint that I've seen in comments and whatnot regarding the third boss, and one that I somewhat share, it doesn't bother me as much as I think it bothers other people, is that it feels like there's no reward for filling the first stagger bar, where I think, the potential solution to this issue that some people have when you fill just one stagger bar and then you gotta deal with the other guy is not like having that first one get knocked down entirely, but maybe slowing his attack rotation or something like that. But a lot of people have complained about how, like, oh, I just spent all this time staggering the first hand and now I gotta go stagger the other one, but the one that I already spent all this time staggering is still in play, But me personally, I don't have as much of it, like, it doesn't really bother me. It's just kind of like, I guess they maybe could do something with that. I don't know. So
yeah, I think the fight as well, they did an update where they made the fight harder, where they trigger animations quicker, where the spinning orbs that follow you explode in a bigger range, and they made the dude that slams his AoE, the one that you can't iframe, they made that humongous. It's pretty punishing towards melee characters. Like getting in there, especially if you're a slow melee character like Beowulf and you don't have like good range capabilities, or Wolf, it is so punishing to get in there if you don't have dash charges.
Yeah.
That is a really nasty situation to be in sometimes. Like I hate that moment when you get to, because that boss fight is one of the ones that can be trivialized, right? The enemies get close together, you have a really broken build, and you win that whole fight in 5 seconds, right? There are situations where that happens, but in situations where it's a little bit more competitive, I just dread approaching that melee boss, because I play a lot of melee characters, and every time I'm like working on the range boss and I finally wear it down, I get the stagger bar, and I look at my heart just sinks. I'm like looking at the melee boss and I'm like, oh, this dude's gonna suck. And every now and then, you just don't time it right and you get one shot. So it's hard. It has the potential to be a really, really difficult matchup if you're actually having to dodge. That's one of the things I think that is really distinct about this fight, is that sometimes you scale so much that you just aren't dodging anymore. You either have so much damage that the only thing that you're really worried about is that big slam, and then everything else you can just kind of accept and you can lifesteal off of it with Black Lotus or something. But this is one of those fights where it's almost impossible to not take damage in the chapter 3 boss fight.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see someone do a no damage run of that boss fight. Very interested to see that. I will say the big slam is actually quite nice, because it actually gives Golden Coat of Chainmail a reason to exist at this point.
There you go. That's true.
GCC baby.
I think Golden Coat of Chainmail, that attack specifically is like the one attack I will say that like makes it almost universally good, like just to avoid that big slam. I actually will say as well, this is a little bit of a deviation here, but I've had to rethink the strength of certain items in challenge runs, like the one with I play with no healing wells, so therefore you can't get like a free 120 to 150 vitality by the end of the run. And that is impactful.
Yep.
It's very impactful. When you can get that amount of vitality, Golden Coat of Chainmail feels pretty much inferior to getting just the straight up health, especially because the health then has synergy with like stuff like Ogre Blood and armor and lifesteal and stuff like that. But without the ability to get so much vitality, Golden Coat of Chainmail does become like an A or S tier item to me in those challenge runs.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're doing those because I did like a tier list on magical objects. Doing those challenge runs recontextualizes so many magical objects, and again, it's weird to rank them based on specifically challenge runs, but like I'm sure things like green armor was already good, but green armor is you're like, oh, okay, here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, green armor, I see you. Yeah.
Well, and the way it stacks too is just so good, especially because like it's like all green objects. Oh well, sorry, all common objects. Wow, okay, I guess I could just like I could get 3 of them and then pivot to something else. That's still very acceptable. Or I could get 5 of them and have just like 200 armor out of nowhere.
Yeah, green armor is one of the best things. Like it's a fantastic common because it's one of the ones that you have to stack the least to get good value out of it. Like you get 1 green armor at the end of chapter 3, and you might get 20 or 30 armor off common, right? Just 1 common.
Yep.
Or you go all the way into it and you get dragon hide, and then that is, I think, one of the silliest and funniest things. I'm delighted every time I see that. It's a pretty low roll opportunity.
Yes.
Getting there is real hard, but yeah, that's an interesting conversation around survivability and builds. But maybe a little bit outside, maybe that a little outside the context of this particular discussion. But we do love our build synergies.
The sadness that I feel of Ogre Blood being almost completely useless in those challenge runs as well is just
Yeah, it's tough. The unfortunate thing with those runs is it makes you crutch egg more for your source of damage, which I don't like, but it's a necessary evil right now.
Necessary evil.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Do be like that
All right.
sometimes.
We're going on to Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga.
Do we want to talk a little bit about the shard in the shop before we get into the fight itself?
Yeah, go ahead and talk about the shard.
The shard, dude, that shard is so magical. I just love it.
Oh, you love it?
I see that shard and I dream of it sometimes. I have a picture of it on my wall.
See, I get there and I'm like, oh, this fucking shard I have to hit 5 times and get 100 money from.
That's actually, it's funny you should bring that up. I do think that the way that they scale shard health is dumb. Shards, I mean, okay, sure, when they're armored up, right? When their enemies aggro on you and you're not supposed to break them, sure, that's necessary to just stop people from racing through the chapters. I understand why we do that. But why are shards in chapter 3 made of titanium?
Sorry. They should be the same. They're the same shards.
Should be the same.
Why would I play Carmilla and I have Nightmare Thorn and I'm so decentivized to use my power? Do I spend like 15 seconds just...
Yep.
Just saying they're beating your head on a shard. I think what it is that enemies and shards scale off of the same metric, and so shards get more HP as the enemies get more HP, and so every chapter shards get a little stronger. But guys, let's not do that. Like, make them scale like the characters or something. Let shards just be made of paper in every chapter, and let's not spend so many iframe, like let's not spend so much long fighting invincible shards. I'm going to stand by and say that I do appreciate that shard as I get into the epilogue. I don't appreciate its durability. That shard can chill out a little.
Well, what you don't know in the back code is they actually give per chapter all the shards 2 green armors. So
bro, no.
Yep.
So we got nerf green armor, guys. Green armor's out.
Yep.
Dude,
stuff.
I would love a boss that has like an immunity and you're always in combat and there's like 4 shards around the boss and you got to go break the shards to trigger like a damage phase.
Ooh.
And they get like added scaling, just keep pushing them up. I would
It'd be
love
like
it.
like a minor.
You know, something I think you would really appreciate, Ace, is in Risk of Rain 2, the final boss steals your items, right?
Okay.
I think you would appreciate that. I think that would be fun. We need that. We need that in ravenswatch. Did you
Dude, could you imagine it like you have a full stack of like green armor and dragon hide and they steal one of your green armor?
You're just like, oh no. No,
My
like the
set
whole
bonus.
stack. It takes like 5-6 green armor and 5 dragon hide, and then or he takes your black lotus, and all of a sudden you can't.
Yep.
You know, that'd actually be an interesting idea on like a Baba Yaga. If you're hit with like a certain attack, she has like the curse swipes, like a potential, I stole whatever your first item was, or
Stole your stack of Ace of Spades.
yeah, something like that.
Oh, your Baba Yaga mortar, because that's hers, right, in the first place.
True.
Hey,
That
you got to
would-
kill her twice.
Exactly, yeah, get her twice.
Oh God.
Or scavengers, Risk of Rain 2 scavengers.
Yep.
Dude, those are
They're
some
little-
wild. Again, like
So
Risk of Rain's a derpier game. I think that it's harder to do
Yes,
that kind
very-
of stuff in Ravenswatch. But anyway,
They're very different games.
Uh,
Very different.
how about skulls and the little dudes that spawn in? I don't know what to call those. Like,
well, you want to
Chicks, they're
talk
called
about
chicks.
entering the house?
yeah, entering
Yeah,
the
they're chicks.
house. Sorry, what did we call them? Does someone have a name?
Is it?
I
Are
believe
those
they're
called chicks?
I believe they're called chicks.
Well, chicks.
Uh,
Those are some of the
that's what she-
nastiest birds ever.
That's what she calls them, at least. So
Yeah, no, she does. That phase is normally completely forgettable. In a tough challenge run, it can be kind of difficult because there's like a little bit of a bullet hell thing going on there.
Yeah.
But that phase is, I don't know, that phase normally doesn't really do anything in the grand scheme of the fight.
Isn't it funny how the little bird thing, like, okay, so if they are called chicks, they do borrow the movement animation, like the little ones, from Rockets. So that's kind of an interesting connection between them and
Yeah.
Chapter 2. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but to me it looks like the same exact connection.
Yeah, I think it is.
yeah.
The skull phase, I think the purple and red skull phase is never really too challenging. That green skull phase though, that can mess you up. Like standing right in front of a green skull as it shoots something out can kill you very easily.
Yeah, and sometimes the poison that she lays down, in my opinion, this could be like that carrot thing again, but in my opinion, it's a little hard to see sometimes.
Brother, I have not eaten enough carrots to see those. Those ones are tough.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yep.
I've actually got a bag of carrots open beside me. I've been crunching on them during our conversation since we talked. I can feel my senses sharpening, but I don't know if I can see those pools, man.
They are quite difficult though. It's like I'll be running through, going to the next skull, and all of a sudden I'm taking like 2 ticks of 40 damage. I'm like, what the hell? Oh, there's a pool there. What the? Get me out of
Yeah.
here.
There's also,
And
go ahead, Ace.
Well, the attack range on those skulls, like the range they can detect you from and like actually shoot their attack off, you can have like 4 of those triggering at once, and that's quite a bit of map that's being covered. And the ones that are right next to you, you have very slim windows of areas to move to dodge those if you're not using an iframe. And then you got all the stuff coming around like that. That phase, I have died in like some pretty important runs. Luckily co-op runs, but like I understand deaths in that particular part of the fight.
He's a man of the
Pretty easy.
people.
Yep.
Man of the
YouTuber
people.
listeners, Ace is immortal. He understands this.
Well, the purple is honestly like a joke of a phase. Like it's so easy, and then the red is like just slightly harder. Like it's not. There's a little more interactability with it. It's not as easy as the purple ones, but it's still pretty easy. And then yeah, like you said, the green one just like is insane. Mostly because I think the amount of damage that those skulls can output. And I think even if like compared to that little purple laser the purple dudes do, the green vomit does I think 10 times more in one hit. If you get hit by multiple like projectiles, like you said, standing in front of one of the guys.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You could get hit by all 3 of those projectiles a lot easier than getting hit by like 3 ticks of the lasers.
Yeah.
Something else that I wanted to mention, and this is more of a suspicion. I haven't like sat down into it, but if you notice, okay, so when we rolled out the main launch, if they change it so that intangibility frames now work on poison pools. So in chapter 1, from the tentacle boss, from spider poison pools, and so the AOE's in Baba Yaga fight is the same things, right? But I feel like sometimes I see inconsistencies with that. Like if I come into a an AoE damage instance with my intangibility on, I don't have any problems. But sometimes when I try to activate it or I try to iframe it, you know, I'm just like passing through. Maybe like I think that in the chapter 3 bosses, when they're doing one of their spinny attacks, I think it's actually an AoE damage instance technically on the bosses. And I notice sometimes I feel like the damage is coming through the iframe, and I'm not sure if that's a perception thing or if there's actually something going on.
I think you can get hit. Aladdin's carpet, you can get hit by the poison in Baba Yaga's fight, but you can't with the spider's poison or the fire.
Really?
That's crazy.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's weird, dude. That doesn't feel like an intentional thing though.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a timing to it, like what you're saying. Like I haven't picked up if it's like, did I use my carpet as I was in the poison, or did I just fly through it? But I know that I've been hit by the poison in Baba Yaga fight.
So weird, dude. I'm glad I mentioned that. That's I'm gonna have to. Man, I wonder if that's something that's gonna get patched out, or if that's just because you know sometimes there's been a behavior in the game that I was like, man, that seems buggy, and it's just been that maybe the UI hadn't been built out around it enough, or maybe it became normal to me enough reference.
I think it is a known issue. I think I did see it. Someone posted it in the game or in the Discord after they fixed the carpet not being hit by the fire. Okay, so Baba Yaga herself. I feel like a lot of characters can kind of counter Baba Yaga pretty easily. Like I feel like Wukong almost has no case why you should ever take damage from Baba Yaga with Wukong's kit. But her main attacks, like the main thing that I worry about is those 2 swipes, because there is very much times where I feel like I've dashed through her back, and I think where instance of damage can trigger on her swipes is the very back side of her, because there's times like that, and I feel like for that reason that is the most threatening attack that she has.
Yeah, there's some times where I personally have an issue where I'm trying to go too fast, and I will like cancel the last like fourth of my dash and get an attack off or something like that. But it's like, oh, I actually needed that space, and I'll get hit by something on accident. That happens most often with an ability like that, I feel.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes as you get more familiar with the character, you start feeling a lot less punished by stuff. I remember the first 2 or 3 times that I took Geppetto into that fight, I had a really, really rough time because I just wasn't as cognizant of the fact that, you know, the defense is an iframe, but it's a relatively short iframe. So when I was doing some things with Geppetto, there were times when if I were just a little bit familiar with the character, I would have just sailed through that fight, but instead I got defeated. There's also a conversation there, I think, around melee versus range survivors. I mean, not survivors, characters. Did you hear that Risk of Rain coming out there? My God. I've been playing a little bit lately. I think that there are some that are going to have a harder time with Baba Yaga's movesets, but it's not as bad as the chapter 3 boss fight, the hands. I think that Baba Yaga is going to be more even between a melee.
I think the one who struggles the most, if I had to put a pin in it, it would be Geppetto, just because his dummies don't stand a chance unless you have heart ties and a ton of vitality. They just get melted, and that's like my biggest case for taking the spinning ulti, so you can keep them alive with their iframes by making them spin. So that one, if you have the spinning ulti, then it's fine, but if you can't keep your dummies alive, then you lose a lot of DPS, and that makes that fight a little more tedious. I had a really tanky run recently with Geppetto. It was completely fine. I did still win, but it was completely fine going through against most other enemies because I could place my dummies in a way where I could like still have them be useful. But once I got the Baba Yaga, it was a game of cat and mouse. Her chasing me around constantly and me trying to get anything from my dummies. But, and like, yeah, I could take a hit or 2 every once in a while, and I could heal it back up pretty easily, pretty consistently. But I could not, especially in the last half of her health bar, could not deal damage consistently. It was just chasing me around for 10 minutes.
Yeah, that fight can become a cat and mouse. But I think that's a good way of putting it together. And it's a little bit because I imagine part of it, like I'm not nearly, I don't have nearly as much time on some characters as my mains, and so I think that there are some characters that are uncomfortable for me, but kind of like, you know, what Ace described with chapter 3, when you figured out the right things with Melusine, all of a sudden that fight became, you know, fairly straightforward. But until you had that, it wasn't manageable. Geppetto, definitely one of the things that's crippling for him in that fight is that Mega Puppet is not really viable. Like, it's very hard to get Mega Puppet out and have it do well in the Baba Yaga fight.
Yeah, I think the other thing that really struggles in that fight that I find very comical, but I hate, is any dash like Vajra build or something playing like leaping strikes. You can do it, you just can't attack her while she's doing her laser beam. You can run through her at any other time, but the amount of times that I have been on the other side of the laser, like Aladdin, you can backflip over her still, and you're on the other side, and you're like, okay, let me go attack her. You try to leaping strikes her, and you just bounce off. That's such a frustrating feeling because she's the only enemy in the game that has something like that. I remember first fighting Baba Yaga and being super caught off guard with that fact, but I don't know, that feels bad sometimes, that you're just walking around her and you are in a position to deal damage, but you can't deal damage because you're going to bounce off of her and be stunned and then get lasered down.
Yeah, it happens with Carmilla's special as well. If you try to special her, you'll just like
Oh,
run into
yeah.
the eyeballs and bounce off.
Yeah, that, I don't know, it feels bad again, especially when you're on the other, because Carmilla, you can defense to the other side of her and then be like, okay, cool, let me get an attack off, I have a nice injection build, and you're just like, no, you can't attack me during this, which is kind of rough.
At least injection works now.
Yeah, at least it works. Anything else on her? I feel like the rest of her kit's pretty. The only other thing that can be a little sketch is when she's like pinned herself against a wall, and then she does the laser attack. Now you're like, oh, I really gotta pay attention now and take care of this. That's like the only other time I find her attacks to be super threatening. If you are doing a challenge run and the fight goes long, I was doing a 7 negative modifier stream and I got hit by a tentacle that I thought I was out of range on, and it one shot. Those can be tough when there's a lot of tentacles, but most fights, like outside of like harder challenge runs, I don't feel like your fights go that long, so I don't think that experience is too impactful, like 95% of your runs.
So something I will say is that when Avalon first came out and those claw bosses were the last enemies in the game, I was super low on Vorpal Blade and against Goldilocks Porridge, and just like how Baba Yaga has been implemented with how many ads she spawns, even the tentacles in the very last phase. Being able to get those health orbs and have those items be useful after like the end of chapter 3 is so nice, because that was like the big thing that I initially didn't really like about the claw bosses, is they are the only boss of the nightmare enemies that don't, of the nightmare bosses that don't have any sort of ad phase, where like the tentacles happen with the first guy and then the little eyeball nubs happen with the second guy. They're the only one, or yeah, they're the only ones that don't have anything that spawns health orbs or anything like that, or like, you know, things that you can kill with Vorpal Blade.
Right.
So I like that her boss fight does bring back that functionality, because it was like before in chapter 3, if I saw Vorpal Blade, I'd be like, why would I take Vorpal Blade at this point when I just killed Arthur? I have like half of chapter 3's map left. There's no point to take Vorpal Blade at this point. Whereas now there's a much better case for it when you can kill skulls faster, you can kill the chicks in the first area faster, you can kill the tentacles in the last phase faster. It's a much better solution to me to have that in the last part of the game, considering so many items rely on, you know, being able to kill enemies quickly, like Vorpal Blade and the health orbs for Goldilocks Porridge.
One other shout out item I would say is the Baylor's Eye. So Baylor's Eye, well known, it's well established, it's a very, very strong item, and some people would just call it straight out broken. And I think that if there is a balance to it, there's a balance around Baylor's Eye, it's probably the Baba Yaga. There's a lot of characters that fight exposes, if they have a Baylor's Eye, it takes away a lot of their iframes, and there's a lot of, you know, mobs and stuff you have to fight before you unlock the fight itself. So I think that Baba Yaga is one of those bosses that if you're debating picking up a chapter 3 Baylor's Eye, she's one of the bosses that might make you rethink that. Because you'll go really, really fast on the claw bosses for chapter 3, but then you might have some problems against claw.
Yeah, I think like there's some characters where I wouldn't mind getting the Baylor's Eye, and there's some where I'm like, yeah, I probably would rather have the iframes, like Wolf, for example. I'd rather have the jump on his special, or Yeah, like for example, Mellow Sign, I wouldn't mind grabbing it, make her power and her special more
Yeah,
potent.
because her iframes come
So-
from her defense and from her C dance if she has it.
Much less punishing.
I like chapter 3. I think that there's some challenges around how interactive it is. There's a design decision around how the pathing works, but I like that. I like that we have a chapter that has a straightforward approach. I know that it's different from the others, but it's not a problem in my mind. And overall, I'm excited to see changes to mini bosses, and I think that it is a good final crown to top off, cherry on top for Ravenswatch. And they worked really hard around the aesthetic and the feel of the chapter. And I really want to give them credit for that side of it, because it is very unique and it is a really cool design.
Yeah, I'd say I like it overall. I think just maybe due to the amount of time that I've had with it, like I'm more familiar with chapters 1 and 2, so it's easier to call them my favorites, especially chapter 2. I think it is just kind of by default my least favorite, but not in the way that I feel like it's bad or anything. It's just, you gotta have one least favorite. You gotta have a favorite, and you gotta have a least favorite. So
All the children
yeah,
can't be your
unfortunately-
favorite child, right?
Exactly, yeah. It drew the short end of the stick. It's a nice chapter. I like its uniqueness at the very least, so.
Yeah, Febreze, you gave me a little bit of motivation to do that one chapter thing. Unfortunately, you can't pick your chapter when you do that, but like do chapter 3 and see how chapter feels. Because I have done it before, and I know that it felt a lot more difficult, but playing chapter 3 from level 1 where you don't have this ability spam, where how does chapter 3 play when you actually need to pay attention to your iframes and stuff like that a lot more in every single fight. So I'm going to try that and
Dude.
see if I rethink anything.
Dude, I'm excited to check that out. I think it'll also be fun content for you because it's relatively short form. It's like 20 or 30 minutes as opposed to an entire run. So I think that'll be an interesting thing. I know that like saving game saves at the end of chapter 1, at the end of chapter 2, or going into the prologue, saving the game and then picking it back up. It's save scummy. It's not like the ideal way. The cool and the right way to play the game is to play it all the way through. But I honestly think that if as a community we had more repetitions with chapter 2 and chapter 3, we'd probably have less problems. We'd probably have less issues with design and being surprised by things. And so I think that if people want to do that, or start one chapter at random with the challenge modifiers, I think it's really helpful to help you have an opportunity to learn enemies and interactions and understand the design. And you should do whatever you want, do whatever you enjoy. But I think that chapter 2 and chapter 3 you might enjoy a little bit more if you have the chances to embrace and play through that experience more frequently than you will just going straight from chapter 1 every time. Anything else, y'all? How you feeling?
I feel good.
Feel good.
Well, thanks for checking out the video. Thanks for coming here and talking with me, guys. And we'll see you in Reverie.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Good talking,
See you
y'all.
later.